next guest really needs no introduction. He's one of my closest friends. Is there a word stronger than love? Seriously, I don't know. Whatever that word is, him. I do that him. He is an absolute beast, and he's an absolute gentleman. Danny Vega.
Good morning. All right, so I'm going to be talking today about, and by the way, forgive this, but I got really dry mouth, so I'm going to be talking about optimizing your diet for performance. And when I say performance, I'm not just talking about athletic performance. I'm talking about cognitive performance. I'm talking about getting the most out of your ketogenic diet, because I hear this so often: I do just fine with this, or you don't need more protein than this. And those are all true facts, but at the same time, you want to be optimal. Optimal versus acceptable. That's what I'm here to talk about today. And a lot of you have been doing keto for a long time, so we want to take it to the next level. We always want to improve. We always want to build upon what we've learned, and we want to practice that. So a little bit about me. You guys know I've been doing everything since I was 10 years old. Played football, track, college football. I did capoeira. That's how Maura found out about me, by the way. She saw a picture of me on MySpace doing capoeira, and the rest is history. Powerlifting, Muay Thai. I ran my first half marathon after starting keto, obstacle course races, and then, of course, Dr. Baker got me into indoor rowing again, and now I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I'm a father, first of all, and I'm a husband. Of course, you guys know the Ketogenic Athlete and now the Ballistic Health podcast. Been doing that for 3 years. And then, of course, with Fat Fueled Mom, I do the Fat Fueled Family podcast. I'm a mediocre YouTuber. Thank you all for following us, because we put about 3 or 4 videos up a year. So, and of course, I love meat. First of all, I just want to take a minute to thank Brian and the Ketovangelist team, because so many people are here today who have been abandoned by traditional medicine, and to have this huge space where we're not just talking about science, we're talking about the stories. So many lives have been changed, so many businesses have been started, so many ideas have been launched here. How many people, just from today, just from this weekend, have taken something and are gonna take some action steps, some new action steps when they go home? And then, of course, all the things that you didn't know before, just the little tidbits that you can just add to your lifestyle and make it better. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. I also want to give special thanks to all the people I listed here who I've blatantly stolen from at some point or another. So let's first talk about what is keto, because so many times people say that's not keto. And technically, all of these things are keto. You see here this zero-carb bread that has wheat in it. That's keto, right? Because ketosis is a state. It's a metabolic state. So you can be in ketosis and have that. You can also have that one plate there by that weird Danny Vega dude who's eating sweet potatoes and cabbage and still in ketosis. Then, of course, bacon-wrapped hot dogs are keto. And then steak is keto. And then, of course, you have, vegetarian versions of keto. So there's a million different ways to do keto. And when you start, you got to just keep it simple. The first things that you do, you try to keep your carbs low, and it gets a little bit more complicated, and hopefully you're building on that over time. So first we'll talk about starting a ketogenic diet, becoming fat adapted, what happens with that, and then optimizing your ketogenic diet. So the first thing you're going to do is keep the carbs low. That's the first thing. And then, of course, eating adequate protein. I want to just mention that protein is really, really important, especially the first 3 to 4 weeks. A lot of times what you'll hear in these groups is like, I did keto and I lost all this muscle. And then, of course, the first thing we say is, well, you didn't lose muscle, you lost glycogen and you just lost a bunch of water. And while that's true, if you're not eating enough protein, you very well could be losing lean mass. So protein is really, really important at the beginning of your ketogenic diet. The same thing goes for fat. So if you're removing one fuel source from your diet and you're not replacing it with another, you're just running out of fuel. So that's why keto is a little bit more precise than low carb, because you are controlling for these things. But what happens over time is that you'll see as you're becoming fat adapted, you'll start to see improved performance again. You'll start to see that your physical activities feel the way they felt. Like for me, after 3 months, I got my pumps back in the gym. And then, of course, you start to see you get new powers. You know, you get to start intermittent fasting. It becomes easy for you. And, of course, extended fasts are something that you can now do. And then hopefully over time, you're improving the quality of your food. So at first you were doing all of your keto casseroles with a bunch of dairy and a bunch of stuff. And hopefully over time you start to see, let me see what happens when I remove dairy. Let me see what happens when I remove nuts. And all these things should be part of it. And we're going to talk about self-experimentation later. So these are the points that I want to get across today. And we want to talk about prioritizing animal protein, ditching the non-caloric sweeteners, because this has been a huge part of our journey, eating nose to tail, keeping it simple, and of course engaging in self-experimentation like I just mentioned, doing things like removing dairy, increasing your protein, decreasing your protein. So I'll start with prioritizing animal protein. When that first year of keto, I was very comfortable with having a low protein diet because I felt good, and like I said, despite having low protein, I did pretty well. But I have found that I've been able to put on a lot more muscle, and I feel a lot better if I'm getting adequate protein. So I think that inadequate animal protein poses a much greater risk to your body composition, your body fat goals, than not having enough protein. Of course, if you have higher animal protein, you're going to have more micronutrients, and you're also going to have better absorption because it's going to come with animal fat. The other thing that you can do with protein that I noticed is that that whole first year when I had my fat really, really high, I didn't feel the level of satiety that I began to feel when I upped the protein. So having a higher protein diet could be very, very helpful at leveraging. You can leverage that for satiety. So I just want to go over this real quick because we just want to first talk about what the OGs of keto say about establishing your protein. So you'll see here from an article from Dr. Finney in 2004. He talked about 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. He said that 1.2 grams would be the minimum that you should have to not risk losing lean mass. And then 1.7 is probably the maximum, so you don't want to mess with your ketone production. I would argue at the bottom here like that depending on your metabolic history, your insulin sensitivity, the amount of muscle you carry, the activity level, that you can eat a lot more than that. But you'll see here as well from the Art and Science of Low Carb Performance that 0.6 to 1.0 grams per pound of lean mass is what they recommend. So I'll go over a little example here. So someone who's like my size, 220-pound male with about 10% body fat, is 100 kilograms. So based on that first calculation, it's 120 to 170 grams of protein a day. And then you see for in the second example, 198 pounds of lean body mass, 120 to 200 grams of protein. And like I said before, you can go much higher than this depending on your activity level, the amount of lean mass you carry. All of those things will help you clear glucose better. They'll help you utilize that protein better. If there is a demand for that protein, you're going to use that protein. So here's like my soapbox moment, because we have really come down on this pretty hard in the last 8 months because we started to see a few things. But first, let me just talk about what I see in the ketogenic community, and it kind of upsets me, because what are we telling people when we know that they have issues with sweets and controlling their mouth, and we're just replacing all of these sweet things with sweet alternatives? And I get it that we need to have a bridge to transition us, but it's really harmful. I can tell you that every single time I've agreed to have a company send me some stuff, I cannot control myself. I can't. So there's a few things that can go wrong when you consume non-caloric sweeteners. And if you look at the research, you can see sometimes that some things go either way. So I'm not saying definitively that all of these things are going to happen if you have non-caloric sweeteners, because not only are the results kind of varied, but we're talking about several different non-caloric sweeteners that can impact you differently. But at the heart of it, I think, in principle, we need to really be wary of non-caloric sweeteners. So here's one example, and you guys, I'll try to see if this affects you guys like it affects me. So this one study from Appetite in 2014 talked about using non-caloric sweeteners and how it impacts our eating. And you may not be surprised that people who consume non-caloric sweeteners, may eat more over time. How many times have you guys eaten a nice, delicious steak meal or ground beef, something really hearty and filling, and you felt full? You either had a Diet Coke after, or you had a keto dessert, and all of a sudden, the doors are open again. You're ready to eat again. Okay, good. I'm not alone. It happens so much. So that's one way. And this is the reason why humans, despite being the smartest species on Earth, cannot control our body weight. Every other animal is eating exactly what it's supposed to eat. Nothing in history has ever been so sweet, or a combination of sweet with fat. None of those things have ever existed. So it makes sense that we're going to eat more of it, because it just never existed. I'll get into that a little bit too, because the hyperpalatability thing plays a big part. So gut health is another thing that can be impacted by non-caloric sweeteners. And most of the time, what you'll see, the main culprit here is sucralose. So if you guys are getting those sugar-free syrups, Walden Farms is notorious. Both Robert and I used to crush that the first year of our ketogenic diet. And then of course we came to our senses. And you can see that this can impact your gut health. Not only could it sterilize your gut, but it can also cause an increase in inflammatory processes in your gut, which could lead to insulin resistance. So the insulin one is another one that's kind of, people, it can go either way. But here's in this first study that Suez et al. Looked at artificial sweeteners and glucose intolerance, it showed that there were inflammatory, let's see what it says here, the functional alterations in the intestinal gut microbiota, and it increased inflammatory, I don't see the details there, or maybe in the bottom. And then the second one shows how these participants reacted the same way. There was a similar insulin response when they were given sucrose, which is sugar, and saccharin, which is sweet and low. So there was some evidence that cephalic response happened. And one of the other examples that you can reference here is that when you're doing a workout and you just swish some Gatorade in your mouth, that cephalic response is kicked. It starts. So just another thing to be wary of. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is eating nose to tail, because eating nose to tail has been something that has made a huge difference for us. And, in the past, I used to say, well, you can eat maybe just try to eat liver once a week, try to get some fish in there. And it's not until I started to really focus on this and getting this every day that I saw some huge differences. For me personally, the biggest difference has been in my skin. And my son, Desmond, has pretty perfect skin, but he had always had this condition on his elbows that, we could never fix. We put him on steroid creams, but when he started eating liver regularly, and by the way, I'm gonna give you guys some practical tips for how to include organ meats in your diet and in your kids' diets, because, it has to be sustainable. So the first reason why we want to eat nose to tail is that we can optimize our micronutrient status. It's totally possible to have micronutrient deficiencies on a ketogenic diet. And then the second one is a little bit more nebulous, because it's not exactly set in stone like how people ate. You have so many different populations, but in general, we want to try to eat a diet that's consistent with the way we ate historically. So here I want to talk about a few of my favorite carnivore foods, and you'll see kind of why I like to include them. Egg yolks, liver, 80-20 ground beef, fish roe, specifically salmon roe, and ribeye. If you look at all of these different things, you'll see a lot of these things have vitamins and minerals that you don't really get in other food products. Like, for instance, Egg yolks are going to be really high in choline, vitamin D. They even have a good amount of vitamin A, vitamin K2, very important for the absorption of vitamin D. Liver, where liver shines the most is really that vitamin A. You know, vitamin A is so crucial. You see liver very good there, but liver's also high in choline, it's high in folate, your full B vitamins, selenium, potassium, all those things are very, very important for hormone health, thyroid health, all of these things. So, and then of course, salmon roe, we'll talk a little bit about DHA and the importance of DHA. Salmon roe is gonna give you DHA in the phospholipid form, which is gonna be the best, most absorbable form. So here are the few of the things that I wanna talk about, and this is the Paul Saladino section of the presentation, because, you know, last fall, I've been a carnivore since August of 2017, and last fall, I was, you know, doing the Fat Fueled Family podcast, and I was speaking to all these really, really brilliant people. And as someone who does that every week, I'm trying to take what I learn and show you guys, and I'm thinking about these things all the time. And it can get pretty complicated. You know, I start to say, well, what about this? What about this? And Paul was really the one who got me to think about these things differently. Well, what if we can get all of these things from animals? What if, you know, yeah, sure, we can eat plants for enjoyment and sometimes as a supplement, for instance, like carbs, using those as a supplement. But in general, we can get everything we need from the animal if we're eating the whole animal. So you have DHA, collagen and glycine, including the organ meats. And when I say eat the rainbow, I just mean, you know, this is our version of eating the rainbow, is eating every single animal, eating every single part of the animal, trying to eat anything that's local to where you live, all of those things. All right, this is the Georgia Eat section of the presentation. So Georgia Eat has been fantastic at showing the importance of things like DHA for brain health. So she, you know, her main focus as a Harvard psychiatrist is she's going to see a lot of patients, a lot of young patients who are dealing with anxiety, depression, and she's noticed all the different things that go into mental health issues. And DHA is a huge part of it. So you know DHA is going to increase blood flow to the brain during mental tasks. And if you look at the brain, 50% of it is polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are mostly DHA and arachidonic acid. And then you'll see an improved omega-3 index. So we know that in modern diets, we're going to have naturally high omega-6. So that if we can improve our omega-3 status, these are going to be things that can impact our health positively over time. And by the way, it's super cool that one company that has that omega-3 beef, which I haven't tried yet, but that looks cool. Of course, you can see all of the roles that DHA has in everything from lowering blood pressure to aiding in neurotransmitters. And then you can see some of the sources here. I wanted to just make a quick comment on pasture-raised eggs. I understand that it's kind of absurd that you have to pay $7 for a dozen eggs. It is, and you don't have to do this, but I do think that there's a big difference. And just one study here shows that these pastured eggs had twice as much vitamin E and long-chain omega-3 fats, more than double the total omega-3 fatty acids, and less than half the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. So this is why you'll see we always talk about eating pastured egg yolks. It's also, this is going back to traditional food, the way we raise the food, the way we prepare the food. And then of course, fish roe, you see almost 1.4 grams of DHA in the phospholipid form. It's vital for brain development. It's vital for, like I said, all of these things that are important for brain health. And lastly, cod liver. 10.968 grams in just 100 grams of cod liver. And I'll go into cod liver a little bit more because you guys may be thinking of cod liver oil, which is disgusting, but cod liver is actually really delicious. Oh, and shout out to the Nourished Caveman, Viveka Menegaz. She's the one who put us on to cod liver. All right, so the other thing that our ancestors did was they ate bones. So they ate bones, they ate connective tissue. They just automatically knew that certain parts of the animal are gonna improve our health. And so as large vertebrates, it's kind of normal for us to run a glycine deficit because glycine is not really necessary for us to procreate. But if we can improve the amount of glycine that we have, we can impact our health over the long term positively. The other thing is, if we're getting enough glycine in our diets, as carnivores especially, you're never gonna get scurvy. So that's one of the reasons why we don't get scurvy as carnivores. Carnivore diets, modern carnivore diets are gonna be naturally higher in methionine. And methionine restriction has been associated with increased longevity. So you'll see, and this is why a lot of the times people will say that protein needs to be lower. Not only to limit mTOR, which I think a lot of people have spoken about, how the changes in mTOR from eating a high protein meal are transitory, and they're not big. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is the fact that if we lower protein, we lower methionine. And if we have lower methionine, that seems to increase lifespan. But you'll see that Dr. Saladino has also pointed out, because there was a study that what they did was they decreased the rats' protein to 5% of their total calories. And they saw that these rats were living twice as long as the other group. So you said, wow, that's impressive. And so they basically thought that methionine restriction was what was leading to it. It turns out, and this was the study that Dr. Saladino pointed out to me, is that if you balance out the methionine with adequate glycine, you'll be able to see those same long-term benefits. So that's always a good thing. Also, glycine helps clear out oxalates. So if you're one of those people that has to have your spinach or whatever, these oxalate foods, if you're getting enough collagen and glycine, you're going to be able to clear those oxalates better. So here you have something that another Paul Saladino creation, these steaks that we'll put some butter on and we'll put some collagen on top. It's delicious. Those are not tater tots, by the way. Those are bay scallops, so... Obviously, everybody knows the importance of collagen and glycine. The collagen market is ridiculous right now because everybody's trying to put it and use it for their skin and hair and nails, and it's super important. 3 amino acids that are found in collagen are glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. You can see how glycine is very important in glutathione synthesis, and glutathione is our body's antioxidant, so it's very important. Heme synthesis, creatine, collagen, and then removal of intermediates. So we're talking about all the things like oxalates that I spoke about. It can lower blood sugar. These last things, you'll see that glycine has been studied extensively, but it's still kind of in the early stages. So you've seen a small amount of studies showing that it can help lower blood sugar, it can improve your sleep, and it can increase, I already talked about it, increase urinary oxalate excretion. One of the things that I tell one of my clients, I had a client who had lost about 40 pounds and he was getting stuck there. And we started to say, okay, well, let's look at his blood sugar. So he started to test his blood sugar, and he found that he was waking up in the morning with elevated blood sugar. So his body, it seemed, wasn't burning an adequate amount of fat. Something was keeping him from burning fat, and I would argue that it's probably he wasn't clearing the glucose quickly enough. What we started doing was we would add a scoop of glycine, pure glycine, which, by the way, you can also use as a sweetener because it's kind of sweet, and it's not like an artificial sweetener. It's not going to do anything that these artificial sweeteners do. We would do that before bed, as well as walking after dinner, and then he would have berberine, 500 milligrams of berberine twice a day, and within a week, we lowered his blood sugar on average by 12 to 15 points. And in the last 5 weeks, he's been losing an average of 2.7 pounds a week, which is pretty amazing considering he's been with me for 6 months now. So I do see how glycine can help lower blood sugar, and it can also help indirectly boost ketone production, boost fat burning. So glycine, I can't say enough good things about it. You can play with adding collagen to your stuff, adding collagen to your coffee, or you can also directly add glycine. All right, so ancestral diets. Ancestral diets, we want to make sure that we understand that they were not just high protein. Oh, this is the Miki Bendor section of the presentation. Have you guys noticed already, like all the things I'm stealing? So this is Miki Bendor. And we'll talk about how ancestral diets were high in protein, high in fat. Of course, they ate nose to tail, and they prioritized fat and organ meats and connective tissue. And that's really interesting, but first we'll talk about protein. So you'll see here, let's say about 300, 320 grams a day of their diet was protein. And back in the day, the main animals that they were looking for was the megafauna, the huge mastodons. You guys saw the mastodon there, my Floridian brothers hunting a mastodon, 15,000 BC. Now, when those animals dropped off, they went to the next biggest animals, which were the prime animals. So they were looking for the older animals because they had more fat. And another interesting thing is that well, I'll get to that later. First, let me show like a modern study talking about high protein consumption making sense, where these people were eating 5.5 times the recommended amount of protein a day, 4.4 grams per kilogram, which would be like me eating 440 grams of protein a day. And the only issue that they had was some gastrointestinal issues because some people were using protein powders to get to their protein goal. So you see someone like my wife, who's 140 pounds, she was eating about 230 grams of protein a day, which would be about almost 4 grams per kilogram of body weight, and it would be about 3 pounds of ribeye a day. Of course, nowadays, our average consumption in the US is 88 grams a day, which is a third of that historical protein consumption. And we're talking about limiting protein because protein's the problem. I don't think that's the problem. This is the interesting part, the fact that ancestral diets were very high fat. They were looking for the fat. And who was it? Someone told me last night that we were at the carnivore meetup that greetings in certain ancestral groups were, the greetings were actually like, something about fat. Like basically, that's how much it was inside of their culture that their greeting had something to do with fat. And they had people that would inspect the animals and see if there was not sufficient caul fat on that animal, they would reject the animal. Unless they were starving, they would reject the animal. That's very powerful when you think about the fact that these people were hunting to survive. All right, practical tips. So you guys want to know how to get organ meats into your diet? This is the fun part for me because I do this every single week. I do my organ meat burgers or my offal burgers. And I've been practicing and trying out all these different iterations of it. But your typical iteration, you'll see 8 ounces of venison liver, 8 ounces of antelope heart, 2 pounds of grass-fed ground beef, and 2 packs of uncured bacon. Grind it up, shape it into patties, grill it, serve it to your kids. Don't tell them you put organs in their burger. Watch them smile. See what happens when you tell them that they just ate liver and heart. It'll be fun. You see here these adorable little liver pills that Allie makes. This is from Allie Miller's. I really like this. I haven't done this yet because when we freeze our liver, we'll just defrost it, cut it into chunks, and then freeze it again. But Allie runs them through the food processor, and you can put them in those little heart things and get cute little liver hearts. It's adorable. So let's see that. This is for the uninitiated. So the people who are like, liver's so disgusting. What am I going to do? Well, try canned cod liver. I'm telling you, not only is it an amazing source of fat, that little can right there has about 60 grams of fat and like 5 grams of protein. You already know how much DHA it has. You'll see duck liver and pork liver pate. Those are super mild. Chicken hearts. You see anticuchos right there. That's a Peruvian delicious, hearts on skewers. And of course, U.S. Wellness Meats, liverwurst, Braunschweiger. You see the differences. Braunschweiger's just 50% beef trim, 50% liver, and liverwurst has liver and heart and kidney. And surprisingly, it tastes better, even though I'm not a fan of kidney, how it tastes. So when I talk about keeping it simple, this is the next thing that I want to talk about because I think this is where we really, really get in trouble, is we complicate our diet. And I'm not talking about tracking macros and all these things. I'm talking about eating 5 million different things every day. How is that normal? How is that natural? In our lives, we probably had access to small amounts of choices of foods. So I would recommend that you guys find that small list of foods that works and just eat that. Not only because it's more natural, it's probably more in line with how we ate ancestrally, but it's also super important because food variety and palatability may stimulate your appetite. Back in 2017, I decided I wanted to get down to 6% body fat. So, I was already doing my keto counterculture stuff and sharing recipes. And after about a month, I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere because I kept on every single night. It's like, what recipe am I going to do tonight? Not only for content, but also, you get excited to make good food. And so I went to Robert and I told Robert, listen, I need you to just put me on a plan. I don't want to think about it. And sure enough, that month was ridiculous. I gained muscle, I lost more fat, and it makes sense because sensory-specific satiety is something that you guys should definitely look into if you want to succeed and if you want to burn fat and you're dieting, you're trying to get leaner. Sensory-specific satiety is definitely something that we need to leverage. And all that is it just means there's the monotony effect. When you eat the same thing over and over, you tend not to eat as much. That's why the egg fast works. That's why the bacon fast works. You end up kind of saying, you kind of get repulsed by it after a while. And the opposite is also true. So again, going back to the bottom, this bottom point, avoiding frankenfoods, it just means that when you eat things that are really, really hyper palatable and not occurring naturally in nature, you're probably going to eat a ton more of it. So I've done a few experiments, right, in the last couple of years, and I think this is super important. I always talk about why am I doing these things, because people think it's, cool to test their ketones, and I'm all for it. Testing the ketones, all of these things, but know why you're doing it. And I want to just go quickly over, how I like to do self-experimentation. I've learned so much about my body, and then I've been able to connect the dots when I read a new book or when I see something. Oh, that's why that's happening in my body. And that is so powerful because super central to you succeeding in anything is belief that the process is going to work. And so when you are able to connect what you're learning in a book or what you're hearing on a podcast with what you're experiencing in your body, that belief is there, and it helps you stay compliant. Of course, if you have health issues, some people say, I'm doing the keto diet to improve my gut health. Well, if your gut health is not improved, maybe the keto diet's not enough. Maybe you got to go carnivore. And of course, improve performance. And that's where sometimes carbs, may be good. All right, so I went over this last year. I talked about self-experimentation. You want to start with your purpose, establish your timeline, your endpoints, establish how you're going to track progress, summarize your key learnings so you have them all in one place. And the most important part is to develop a plan how to proceed in light of your findings. Because I see this all the time. You're saying, oh, I'm doing this for this week, or I'm doing this for this month. And then the month ends, and what did you do with that information? Make sure that you know why you did something, and when you learn something new, make sure that you're implementing it. So you see all the different measures here. HRV is a new one that can really tell you your parasympathetic status, if you're in fight or flight or if you're more relaxed. If you have a high HRV, low blood sugar, that generally is going to tell you that you are burning fat for energy and you're not overly stressed. So here are some of the things that I've done. Intermittent fasting and extended fasting. We've done exogenous ketones, all of these things. And of course, I want to just correct the last one, TCD and CCD, because, the strong sisters, that's what they're talking about, because we're eating a carnivore diet and we're eating targeted carnivore. So we do some days where we do have some carbs before our training. And then one day, the day that we do have carbs before training, we also make it a carb up day. And it's been working very well. So the key takeaways for this is to know yourself, be honest with yourself. If you're someone who you're seeing the things that I'm talking about now with carbs, that has been really hot lately, and you're wondering, can I use carbs for performance, for instance? Well, know that if you have obvious signs of insulin resistance where you're carrying a bunch of fat still in the midsection and you still have a long way to go in that regard, you may want to just hold off on that and not engage in the type of workouts that would need carbs, and just try to get to your goal weight a little bit better, make sure that your blood sugar is under control. always be learning, always be a white belt. And when you know better, do better. It's okay. There's a lot of things that I've done in the past that, I don't do anymore, but I learned from it. All right. This is where you can find me. I just want to say that today on the Fat Fueled Family podcast, if you don't know about our podcast, I highly recommend it. Maura is amazing. And we're pretty good together, but Maura's the star here. And today, our episode with Jordan Joy is coming out, and we're talking about this performance thing. How do we incorporate carbs in the right context strategically to help us, get more out of our workouts, accomplish our goals? And of course, you see Fat Fueled Mom, Fat Fueled Kids, fatfueled.family is our blog, and all of these things. This is all the places where you can find us. I want to just give us a few minutes for questions if anybody has any questions. All right.
I'm not sure if there's any credence to the blood type thing, but I do know my husband, who's type A blood, his digestive tract is not very acidic, so steaks sit in his gut. Mine's type O. My body burns through meat like it's fuel, and I feel great. Do you know anything about that, and do you have any tips if it's true?
Yeah.
For someone who feels like steaks and sit in their gut, is there a help with that?
The blood type thing, I'm just kind of skeptical about it. I don't know if it's because of his blood type or if it's just something else, why that's happening. But has he ever tried taking digestive enzymes, for instance, that have like betaine, hydrochloride? That would be something that I would recommend to improve stomach acid.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good tip.
He has?
I think so. Well,
Yeah.
if not, I will suggest it.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest, digestive enzymes, helping him get more out of the food, helping, with acid production. What else is in there? Obviously help breaking down the food so that he can absorb it better. I just don't think that the blood type thing, unless someone tells me otherwise, I'm not convinced that that's what's making you different. And these blood type diets, I think they're a little bit too on the end of, you're a special snowflake. We are special snowflakes, but we're special. But biosimilarity, that side of things, I think is a little bit larger than what they make it out to be.
So maybe just even anecdotally, he does feel like meat just sits in the gut and can't personally feel like he can eat more than a steak every couple of days or something. But so.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard people who deal with that, and usually what we'll say is like digestive enzymes, try that for like a month. Bile salts, those will usually be in there.
Okay,
so,
awesome.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you.
No problem.
Good morning.
What's up, brother?
How's it going? So here's my question, because and you and I have kind of talked a little bit about the answer to this one, but I want to see if you have any other ideas, because I'm trying to eat more organ meats.
Okay.
I'm trying. And I'm sure as you know, and most people here know.
You're doing the organ meat burgers.
The organ meat burgers, amazing. But like kidney, there's a very distinct taste to that. Just any suggestions you have, like the organ meat burger, like ideas to incorporate these more nutrient-dense foods into our diets if we're having strong, like visceral reactions to the taste.
Listen, guys, I'm not a fan of kidney, man. Just tastes like piss to me. It does. But Allie Miller had an amazing organ meatball thing with kidney, and it was freaking delicious at her event this week. So obviously start by dipping your toes in the water. Start to do those more, like I said, chicken livers, chicken hearts. All those things are much more mild. And what you'll see, and I've noticed with myself and even with Maura at first when I started to tell her that we're eating organs, she's terrified at everything. Like when I tell her, hey, I got some brains, she's freaks out. But she's noticing that the more you eat these organs, the more, it's pretty amazing. Your body starts to ask for them. Desmond, I'll give you guys a quick example. Desmond, the other day I served him an organ meat burger, and I made him a paleo waffle with honey and butter in it, and he crushes the organ meat burger, asks me for another one, crushes the second organ meat burger, and he's done. So I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta save this waffle, and it stays there on the counter the whole day, and in the afternoon I'm just like, throw it into the garbage. And that's just from eating it for like consistently for like 6 months. So if you start to eat it consistently, I think you'll develop a taste for it. But you don't have to force certain things. You know, like you don't have to eat kidneys. Like I probably have Maura says this, that like my senses are not as sharp as other people, so everything's delicious to me. So, so if you have strong sense of taste and smell, then you probably gotta just tone it down a little bit.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Of course.
How are you doing?
What's up, man?
Hey, what do you say to people, because I know in the past we've heard that eating too much protein, it'll turn to glucose and all of that. So how do you address that when someone brings that up?
I always refer people to 2 awesome resources, and you guys have probably seen it. The first one is Amy Berger's article on gluconeogenesis. So if you just Google To It Nutrition, gluconeogenesis, it's called like everything you did and didn't want to know about gluconeogenesis, and it just talks about the main point of this is that gluconeogenesis is a demand-driven process. It's like if you're driving by a gas station, just because you're driving by doesn't mean you're going to go fill up. You're only going to fill up if you're low on gas. So if there is a demand there, then the protein will be turned to sugar, and that's a good thing. The second one is Dr. Benjamin Bickman's low-carb Breckenridge talk from 2017, where he talks about the role of insulin and glucagon in low-carb diets, and you just see how the role of glucagon in a low-carb diet, and if you have your blood sugar under control and insulin under control, the effects of the protein are not going to they're not going to hurt ketosis. Honestly, like I think, hopefully, we've put this to bed already, but you know, if we haven't, you know, just tell these people, just try it yourself. What's going to happen if you increase your protein for a few days and then you see something that freaks you out, like your blood sugar's higher? I do notice that people have higher blood sugar. I'm not sure why that is, because if it's not new sugar, I can't really explain that, but could be glycogen. I honestly don't know, but all I know is that high protein is just not an issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have to call the questions. Can I get a round of applause for Danny Vega?
Love you, man.